Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I have with me Craig Thompson K9CT. He is on St. Paul Island off the coast of Nova Scotia, operating CY9C, and he's agreed to spend a little bit of time with me today to explain what's going on there in the last 5 days of their DXpedition. Craig, thanks for joining me.
Well, good morning, Kevin. Glad to be here. Glad to be on the island making QSOs.
So let's begin with how are you connected? Are you using Starlink?
Yes, we are. Glenn, W0GJ, has just purchased recently. He tested it on a trip, but it's a Starlink. It's one of the portable units, and it's worked amazingly well. Just think of all the things we got going here. So it really works.
Well, I certainly feel blessed that I'm able to do this, and usually that's not the case. There's usually not enough service for people to have this kind of conversation, so thank you. Craig, let's start with the location. Tell me more about St. Paul Island, where it's located, and a little bit about the background there.
I'm not an expert on the background of it other than what I do know, but you'll notice it's between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and in fact on a clear day you can see both. Quite often it's not a clear day here because the weather is so unsettled and I guess I'd call it unruly. For instance, last night we went to bed, I don't remember what time it was, but it wasn't even moving. The wind wasn't even moving, and literally 2 hours later it was a roar. And this morning we actually have quite a bit of wind. But what happens is these cloud banks move in right off the coast of Nova Scotia, and you can see them. And then in which case then you can't see anything, and then it might even roll right over the top of us. So it's very interesting. You can see lights. In fact, speaking of lights, last night we could see aurora to the north. Of course, that's unusual for where I live to be able to see anything like that, but I'd say it's pretty cool, but from a radio standpoint that wasn't pretty cool. But so anyhow, the lighthouse was obviously used because this was a dangerous passage. You can see there's a major river where people would go to Quebec, and that's an entry point. So a lot of ships pass through here. So the lighthouse was very important. A lot of ships have had terrible accidents here. The history is such that they've estimated that almost 1,000 people have died on this island in modern times. Because it's so isolated and the weather can be so miserable. But even if you walk around the island, there's really not a beach. You'd have to crawl up rocks, and so depending on where you crashed, you'd be looking at straight up and not able to enter at all. But on one side, I looked at it the other day when we were hauling water and scouting antenna locations and that sort of thing, and obviously it would be a life-saving measure because just a visitor to come here would never consider even that. And the island, by the way, we're on what's called the North Island of St. Paul, and there's a split. There's maybe about 100 foot, let's say 100 foot, it might be bigger than that, cut between the North Island, and you can see it on that map, and the main St. Paul Island. And that main St. Paul Island is covered with trees, and it's a beautiful looking island, but right now they will not let anyone land there. It's closed to the public, and they allowed us to be on the North Island. And one of the other things that people should know is the Appalachian Mountain chain, that this is considered the northern tip of that. And what kind of blew me away when I look at the rocks, how they're pushed up out of the seafloor, and obviously been weathered with age. I was amazed actually where did the soil come from? There's probably in some cases maybe a foot or more, but it's very hard to actually have soil, but it's sitting right on top of the rock, and the rock is just amazing. It would have been amazing to see it being formed, pushed up from the ocean or pushed up from the Earth's crust. But so this is considered the north end of the Appalachian Mountains, and it's pretty rugged.
You've certainly given us a sense of how rugged and remote it is, and just in my own research, I was impressed with how notorious that area is for shipwrecks. over the past century or more. Ships going through the Cabot Strait on the way to the St. Lawrence River. Tell me about the team that is there, who are with you, and what was their motivation to come along on this trip?
Everyone but one has been on previous DXpeditions. So from that aspect, there's a lot of familiarity. Some of them have actually been to this island before. We had one new person, Larry W0PR, this was a new experience for him, and obviously a lot of people like that experience. Larry had a background that's pretty, adaptable to a DXpedition in that he's an active contester and that he also works DX. So he understands, after being in many pileups, what it's like to be on the other end. And of course, those are all customers when you're not on a DXpedition. That's how you want to be treated. You want to be treated right. So there's a lot of experience on this team. Everybody just enjoys it. It's just something that you don't want to do it every single day, but it's certainly a great experience for someone to do. I always say you have to have a lot of patience because things never go smoothly. There's always going to be something. And the other thing that happens is you get very, very tired. So the personalities have to be such that you realize that in yourself. And until you go on a DXpedition or get exhausted doing something, you don't even know what kind of a person you are yourself. And every one of the people on this team truly gets that. You have to be very patient. The schedule is rugged. First 2 days you set up, it's almost continuous. And in this particular case, when you go to bed, you're exhausted. When we arrived, everything's wet, wind's blowing, and there's not just a comfortable place to be, and you just have to deal with that. So you get very tired. And so then you start operating, and the schedule is such that it's 3 hours on, 6 hours off, 4 hours on, 8 hours off, 4 hours on, 8 hours off. Then you go back to the 3 hours, 6, and start repeating that cycle. What happens is initially it's very hard to sleep because it's like a buzz. And the reason I say that is because people get tired and you have problems in how you're going to behave personally. So I think it's really important when you're building a team that you have that sort of experience. Everybody here has had that experience and really understands that, and they're very patient.
Well, I can recall our first conversation, Craig, and you talked about this, and the team dynamic aspect really interests me a lot. I know, all of us in the hobby, we want to get into the antennas and the equipment, and we will later on, but it actually intrigues me even more to understand that dynamic of how people coalesce around a goal and are patient, as you just put the work in. And I do recall you saying in the last conversation, after day 5, it starts to feel like a job, even though you're enjoying it and you're having fun. So I think that's fascinating. Who is the team leader, Craig? Is that yourself?
No, there's actually 2 team leaders. Murray, WA4DAN, started the work on this, I believe, actually, when we were at Sable Island last year. And he was talking about it with us, a lot of the same team members. And Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, had helped Murray a lot with a lot of the information details and planning, and he became a co-leader. So both of those are the co-leaders. Obviously, I'd been with Dan before on Sable, and I've done several DXpeditions with Glenn as a leader himself, or me being the leader. We've been on the same teams. So obviously, a lot of planning. Murray's been here before, I think 2 prior times. And so he already understood the island, the issues. He knew how to get the permissions needed, how to get, what supplies. He knew what it was going to be like to come here with tents and generators and all the logistical issues that are going to come into play. Boats, you really can't haul anything here. We did get one boat in here to bring water, and they actually brought up water from the boat in I call it a cut in the rock, where you could bring in a small boat and lift the water up. And get it in place on the grass. But I admire what they did with the boat. But obviously, you can't bring the crew in that way, and you can't bring in all the other things either. So anyhow, all the things that a leader has to think about, there's so much involved, I mean, what I really like also, and you'd like this too, is how Glenn and Murray consult the team about a lot of aspects. So as things go along, you find out who's good at what or has a leaning towards something, and you get tasked with helping solve those things, because the leader can't do everything. So everybody has to step up and do things. So, obviously when you're building a team, you want to bring along people that have different skill sets and can help out. Murray's really good, and obviously Glenn too. So, but I like, just in the last 24 hours with the conditions the way they are and stuff, we consult each other. They discuss with us, band conditions, what band should we be on, what should we do? We want to try to make a goal. There's a solar storm right now. What do we do about it? So, I like that. That's a great way to manage a team.
Well, Craig, you touched upon logistics and getting to the island, and I do follow a lot of the expeditions, and it's typically via boat, oftentimes a government boat, sometimes a chartered boat. But you guys actually got on island via helicopter, and that's probably the first time that I've heard of that. Tell me more about the helicopter access.
I had one other experience. I just mentioned that, and that's how we got into Navassa from Jamaica, which was again quite interesting. It was a longer helicopter ride and maybe just a little bit bigger helicopters. But Murray had contacted a company called Breton Air, and they have a helicopter, and they're a commercial service, and they have the fuel supplies, to help us. So we have a commercial, we do this every day sort of crew. The pilot is Matt, and he's really fantastic. And they load it, they balance it, they are very professional. They'll make trips as fast as safely possible. And when the weather's good, all's good. So it was great to have them. And then at the same time, one of the team members is Pat, N2IEN, and he has his own helicopter, and he flew it up from New York City, where he lives in that area anyhow. And we've been using that as kind of a we need this, we need that, and he runs and gets it. The other day we got some more fuel. He did all of that, packed it in the Pelican cases. In fact, I think I sent you some pictures, maybe. I don't remember. I took some pictures anyhow. And by the way, that landing pad you see there is not there anymore. It's actually there, but what they did is they cut it up because they evidently didn't want a helicopter to land there. But we have permission, so just to the left of where you see this helicopter right now, where I took that picture of Pat that you had earlier in the slides, they cleared an area for us. They actually brought a chainsaw up here to cut and clean that whole area off so it was a flat place to land, and that's actually where they're landing right now. So it's just left of that, maybe 50 feet, and of course that path there looks like a dock or to walk along a sidewalk, but it's not. It's a walkway to get to what used to be the lightkeeper's house, and or maintenance building or whatever. So you can carry stuff along there. We set the gas there, and we carry it into where the generators are. But that's how we've done transportation. Now we'll do a reverse. Like the radios and stuff, we carefully put that in Pat's helicopter and then flew here with all of that stuff very carefully, whereas we used those I call tarps and great they actually had these bags that we'd carefully stack everything in, and then the Breton crew had a rope that was attached to the bottom of the helicopter, and we'd attach it to those, and he would snatch them. He would just hover, and he'd take those loads over and release them on the island. At the time, we had some guys on the island that had been on the first trip, and so all those generators, for instance, were dropped. I can't say dropped. They were carefully put on the island, but we put them in the sacks to bring them over. You can see on the left side the helicopter and the gear being carried. It was amazing actually to watch them in what I call, we have pretty steady winds here, at least 20 miles an hour all the time. And but even so, he'd be careful. They always wanted to land into the wind and take off that way. And then when they'd go up, they'd have to figure out the best way to traverse over here into the wind, get the load to be balanced. Obviously, you don't want the load in front of you, so you want it pulling against the helicopter. It was interesting to watch how good they are. What's also interesting is Glenn W0GJ is also a helicopter pilot, and so we actually had some other experience here. It was always interesting to hear the discussions and look at the helicopter. But that's the logistics of that. We couldn't have done it any other way. That's actually the most expensive part of this whole thing, was doing that, because the fuel is very expensive. These things burn, I guess, a barrel of jet fuel in an hour. And so you can imagine the cost associated with that, and of course the pilot's time and the aircraft's time. So that's where a lot of the money had to go for that in order for this to happen.
Craig, give us a sense of how far it is from the mainland. I presume they're flying out of Dingwall, Nova Scotia?
Yes, it's actually, and in Dingwall, you're actually right on the water, so you can actually see off in the distance. I don't know. Glenn's in here. How far away is it, Glenn?
24 miles.
24 miles? Okay. I would have guessed a little further than that, but
That's to the south end. It's probably 30 miles.
okay, a little bit farther than that, because you have to traverse all of St. Paul's in order to get to the north end of the island. So, guesses 30 miles by air. A lot shorter trip than when we were on Navassa, because they were worried about fuel consumption. So when you're heavily loaded, it uses more, and then going back, obviously, it's not a problem. But you have to have fuel on both ends. In that case, here it's not. You just have to plan your trips. And we had a cart with lots of fuel. I'm going to guess 500 gallons of jet fuel at Dingwall. We actually had a man clear an area in a field for us. His name's Stan, and that's where we actually staged everything. That's actually where Glenn and my vehicles are right now, so when we get back to the mainland, we can load up and head back. But just to give you a sense, you can actually see things if there's no fog. But that's the distance. Obviously, it would cost a lot more if we had further to go, because you use more fuel.
So I'm curious how many trips the helicopter had to make to get all the gear over there. And I'm also assuming that this is very weather dependent, that you probably were looking for the right window to bring all this gear over, correct?
Yeah, we had to be very careful about that, and obviously we have to be sensitive about that for leaving the island, and how much food you have, and all these things. You have to be careful. You don't want to run out of fuel, because then you don't have any lights, you don't have any way to have a microwave or anything like that, because we heat water in order to even eat. So I think we made 5 or 6 trips in the second day. The first day, it wasn't that many. We maybe 3 or 4 trips that day, and there might have been 5 or 6 the next day. And then Pat came in, and that first load was the radios. And that by that time, actually, we had 5 guys on the island, and they were building antennas and putting infrastructure in place, getting all of the tents put up. Obviously, you have to have tents for just to sleep. And so the logistics of getting that done, we actually we were so fortunate, because they were able to get us on the island early and get everything prepared. So actually, we got on the air sooner than we'd even announced. So that was good.
So Craig, let's get back into the team. I've got a photo up now. Could you tell me who's in that photo and what's in the background?
Well, Larry is the guy in the orange shirt, W0PR. This is his first DXpedition. And to the left of him in the white shirt is my K9NW. And standing in the yellow shirt is my partner for WRTC last year, Scott, NE9U. Obviously, all these guys, I've been on DXpeditions with these guys, and Scott has actually been down to my station and operated as a team member. So I know all of these guys for quite a while. That's Lee, very happy Lee, and he's obviously a very good HF operator as well, but he has a special interest in getting VHF on a lot of requests. So he's done 432 EME, and starting today he's doing 2 meter EME, and actually I know he's going to do some meteor scatter and whatever else is offered, but I know for sure meteor scatter that he's actually got guys with schedules to try to do meteors. And then to the left, on the left side there, he has 6 meters. So right here is actually one of our team leaders, Murray, in the lime green shirt, and below him is Adrian, K08SCA, who just joined us. He was at N5J at Jarvis. You did an interview with him. And then Dan, W4DKS. This is the first time I've operated with Adrian on a DXpedition, but I've known him for quite a while. These are all great guys. Obviously, Murray and Dan were at Sable Island last year, and they do a very, very good job.
So, Craig, when I've talked to other DXpeditions, they've got multiple operating locations, but it looks like you had one primary HF tent and Lee off by himself doing the VHF. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, right behind Murray would be where the VHF was located. You maybe could even see the 6 meter antenna through that window but you can't discern that right now. But yeah, normally we try to have 2 locations so that you can be on the same band on 2 different modes. It's not really practical here because of the logistics. Maybe if we located antennas further away, we could have done some of that, but you'd have to have dual antennas, just double the work. Obviously, especially if you have double sites. Obviously, in this picture, on the left is Lou, N2TU. Him and I have co-led several DXpeditions. And then you got Glenn there's with a big smile, and of course myself in the foreground. One person that was missing from the last team shot was Pat. He normally operated in that crew, but he was actually with the helicopter, running some stuff back and forth. And so I wasn't able to take the team picture at the same time, but I did get a shot of him. You saw that initially in his helicopter when he just came back. So this is some of the sleeping quarters. Actually, that one tent off to the left there is the tent that our team, we have 3 sets of teams with 3 operators each, and in case of the team you saw, Adrian and Murray and Dan, and they have 4 people on their team. But we rotate the shifts, so there's three teams that just rotate on and off all day. But that's our sleeping tent as a team, which is good because we go to bed, we wake up at the same time. Here's some more sleeping tents, and you can see the arrangement. Some guys wanted their own tents. Some of them have CPAPs, that sort of thing. Wanted it close to the power, so that's why we split it off like that, so as an explanation. But that just to the left of those orangish yellow tents is the actual lighthouse, and that's Scott 99U inside of our mess tent. And you can see the microwave, the water in the blue tank. Over there where Scott is actually at, we have a Keurig, or a couple Keurigs, and then there's some soda for everybody to enjoy. Anybody that wants to share anything, it's sitting down below. So sometimes when Pat goes to the mainland, he'll bring back, well, for instance, when Matt came back to help with the Parks Canada, he brought donuts. So occasionally we'll get a treat. This is actually our bathroom, but also storage facility. Of course, when you're on a place like this, you have to be environmentally conscious. So you have to do what you got to do, and so we everything has to be secured. And we clean up the area. You can see it's very messy. The buildings are deteriorated, so they cleaned up an area there. This is actually where the water was brought up, and it's staged for us, and this has to be carried up. You can see it's a hill. It's quite a ways away, but you can see, and you can actually see where the break is between the 2 parts of St. Paul's Island, and that's actually where they brought the water up. And when I walked down there, I couldn't even imagine it. them doing that. This is our power and light, St. Paul Power and Light. Obviously the Honda generators work great. Everything's 120 here, and that was a thought because we had the PGXL amplifiers, which are made by 403A and sold by Flex Radio. And one of the concerns is we got to be able to operate 120. That's a 120 through 240 volt amplifier, and they'll put out about 700 watts, 750 watts on 120. And most of the time we're really not running that much power because if you don't want to create such a large pileup that you can't even manage it. So we're careful about how much power we use to manage the pileups too. So in terms of power consumption, but so anyhow, that works out really well. Those blue cords obviously run. This is actually Lee's VHF setup, and you can see the 432 antennas on his mast, and he secured that to that cement there. He actually drilled in cement anchors and fastened it right to that. But when we had a storm the other day, it actually broke a piece of mast above where it would have been between where the cross boom is and where the rotator is. It just bent. So he made it work, and so he had it higher, but this is obviously adequate to do. But the wind is just something else here. This is a 6-meter antenna. And when he first came here, conditions were very good. He was actually working Europe from here. And subsequent to that, he's worked guides in the States, but we haven't had that many openings. This is actually a very cool antenna. I wish we could use it more. It's a 10-meter Yagi, and I had the pleasure of making QSOs with it one morning on CW, and it was just phenomenal. But with this solar activity that we've had the last few days, it's really had an impact on 10 and 12. This is actually a dual bander, 10 and 12. And we had a little problem because we have a diplexer and with 2 filters, and the 12-meter filter actually is defective. So we were not able to run 12 and 17 at the same time. So we're using this on 17, and we put up another Yagi, which you have a picture of. We put it far away on 12 meters. This is actually an A3, and it operates on 20, 15, and 10. And you can see the lightkeeper's house behind it, and then also what's left of the helipad. This particular one is the 40-meter vertical, and we added that to our set of antennas. We had a dipole up. We decided that we were going to switch things around, so a couple days ago we decided to put this up. It's a very effective antenna on 40. This is a picture of, you can't see it. I mean, if you stare really hard, you can see there's an inverted V, but that's there for 60 meters. Right, you can see the lighthouse to the right, and then you can see the 3 tents there that they're sleeping in. But right above that, you can see an inverted V for 60 meters, and we operated that last night for the very first time. Made a lot of contacts. Obviously the lighthouse, which is not used at all, and you have no access. It's dangerous. The way up there to the top is rusted and be very unsafe. So we took a slingshot, and up there at the very top you can see a 160 and an 80-meter inverted V, which have been working really well. That height is about 140 feet above sea level. This is the way the station's laid out. You can see all the flex radios. The laptop is sitting above, but we use USB connected, wireless keyboards and mice, and we even have our own custom-made mouse pads. And then you can see the Maestro, the brand new Maestros that came out, and those are all Flex 6600s. So those are 2 operators right now on HF, and they're probably either on CW or phone, depending on when this picture was taken. But they have the choice. The team members make the choice as to what's open and what makes the best situation. Who are we trying to work? Try to get as many QSOs in the log as possible. So that's generally the HF, CW, and sideband sides.
Craig, this might be a good time to throw in who the major sponsors are. You're talking about Flex here, I think DX Engineering. Who are the major sponsors?
Well, obviously, I'm wearing a T-shirt. You can see Flex Radio. But Flex Radio obviously was major in all the equipment that they let us borrow. And then we also have DX Engineering, who has helped really every single DXpedition that I know of. Anybody that asks, they say yes. Incredible support. I don't even know of one DXpedition I've been on that DX Engineering didn't take a lead on. Here you can actually see we're operating. We have one operator running FT8 all the time, and you just have to keep things in the queue and watch what's going on and make sure that things are working. You can see the stations are all identical, except here we actually have an additional screen. So N1MM is actually running the network and the time synchronization. But if you see these displays, those are actually the WSJT FT8 decoding windows, and of course everybody knows that. What we've done just in the last 24 hours is we've received an updated version or a modified version from the results of the Jarvis DXpedition, and we've actually put it on there, and it's very effective. It seems to decode better. I don't know why, maybe timing issues or whatever, but obviously that's Super Fox is in its infancy, and it's not obviously perfect yet. So depending on the conditions or the bands, we will switch between Super Fox and Fox and Hound. This is actually all of the filters that we have. You can see on the left, you can see a triplexer on top with the 20, 15, and 10 that go to that tri-bander, and over on the right you can see a diplexer that went to the 12 and 17. And then down below, right in the center of the table down below, you can see where we have an antenna patch panel. And that patch panel is very obvious as to what bands are going on, but every station line is connected. So when the operator comes in, he can take station 1 and put it on 15 meters, or station 2 and put it on 20. And that's how we do that.
Craig, one of the things that I've found to be somewhat unusual about this DXpedition is how active you and the others are on social media. For example, you've done an interview with Tim Duffy. You're here with me today. And in my experience, that is incredibly unusual. Usually there's a DXpedition pilot in the States that is handling all that. Tell me about that. That must have been an intentional decision on your part to stay involved with ham radio operators that were trying to make contact?
Yeah, well, what's interesting, I think it's the makeup of the team are active on social media, which I think it helps. There is a team of guys actually supporting us. Somebody's doing the money, the logging. Got Bill Engel, K5DHY. He uploads the log. I send him the logs every day for club log uploads. But there's other people involved, so that because there's a lot of day-to-day things that happen. Money comes in, things have to be paid. I mean, there's just a lot of other things that go on. There's Chaz. I just don't remember his call just a second, but he actually does a website. So, when we have something, we send it to Chaz, and then he updates that. And then a lot of the guys here are just connected. So, while we're sitting there, we've got a phone or a Surface or something that we can actually communicate with people because they like to know what's going on. There's a page just for St. Paul Island, CY9C, and we've had a lot of give and take back and forth on that page on Facebook, which I think is excellent because we get great feedback from all of the people out there, all the hams that are trying to communicate with us, and their observations, what's working, especially on FT8. There was a lot of discussions about that, about Super Fox. And so they will send us a lot of direct emails right to Murray or to Glenn or to whomever's on the team, and we discuss that and the solutions to that, and then we post what we're going to do to try to maximize the benefit of that. So you probably have seen a lot of that, which I think is good. It's a quick way to communicate with the general population out there of people that are chasing. the contacts. But at the same time, we try to tell them what's going on with here, the weather, because it's so crazy how quickly it changes, but also band conditions, what's open, what's not open. I mean, obviously people can see what's going on, but we called CQ on 15 meters at sunrise, got no response for 2 hours. So, it's a great test of propagation. I'll say that to have a station like us, when people are listening, but then we can communicate. We're not seeing anything. So don't be frustrated. Just be patient. We're here and we're trying.
So, Craig, it seems unpredictable, but looking ahead to the next, 4.5 days that you're going to be on island, do you have any advice for operators that want to make contact in a certain mode or on a certain band?
Well, we follow the sun, and we're on every band. Every operator understands what they want very well, and right now we know where the MUF is exactly, and that's where they're, and we have stations operating the next band up to be a band opener. So I would just pay attention. Obviously, propagation, you can read all about it, but you really need to be on the air. Right now we have a skew path, or we did all morning, to Japan, which it was long path. We have no idea what path, but we were not going direct. You couldn't go over the pole. But we had a pileup of Japanese stations, Chinese stations, and this was the same antennas pointed at Europe, and we weren't even hearing any Europeans. So it's just one of those things. We're on, believe me, we're on every band. We'll be on 160, we'll be on 80, all the way up to 6 meters. So just hang with us. If you have a question, just go to the web page, the page on Facebook, and send us an email or a text or whatever, and we'll let you know directly.
So, Craig, I'm very mindful of your Starlink connection and also the fact that either you need to operate or you need to get some rest. So I'll wrap up. Before I do, are there any last comments you'd like to make?
Well, I would just say it's a pleasure being part of this team. We've got a really great group of guys, and to be honest with you, when we're on voice, it's amazing how many friends of everybody always say hi or stop by. And I'd suggest that, work us, even if you don't need this for DXCC, just give us a call. And we've got a lot of friendly guys here that we want to be busy too. So please stop and say hi, try to work us, and have some fun. We got a great bunch of guys here. I can't say enough about the team. Everybody gets along really well together. This is the way to do teamwork. And I appreciate the leadership that Glenn and Murray have provided to us. It's been a very successful DXpedition. We're going to stay here until our goal is to try to hit 100,000, but it may be that the gods of propagation may have better influence than we do. So it is what it is. We only have permission to be here for a certain time from Parks Canada, so there is a limit.
Well, Craig, I certainly appreciate the time you've taken today, and I want to pass on my thanks specifically to you, but also to the team. Thank you for joining me.
Okay, well, thank you, Kevin. It's my pleasure always. You do a great job.
I've been talking to Craig Thompson, K9CT, who is on St. Paul Island off the coast of Nova Scotia, operating as a team with CY9C. Look for him on the bands.